Welcome to today's Explainer. We're unpacking a really fascinating character study today. Our goal here is to objectively map out the chronological and psychological evolution of one of the most polarizing figures of our modern era, Elon Musk. We're going to dive deep into our source material to look past the daily headlines, break down the actual data, and try to truly understand the storm within the man.
All right, let's just jump right in. 336. Now, I want you to take a second and try to imagine what $1 single billion looks like. Got it? Okay, well, the founder of SpaceX, Tesla, and the Boring Company has a net worth that is a staggering 336 times that number. It's a scale of wealth that is honestly almost impossible to wrap our heads around, and it firmly makes him the richest billionaire on the planet.
And having that sheer amount of power brings us to the central dichotomy of our explainer today. Is he truly building the future for us? Or is he just kind of playing with us? On one hand, he's lauded as this world-saving visionary, right? A once-in-a-century genius changing how society functions. But on the other hand, he's often seen as an erratic, unstable provocateur, acting totally on a whim. So to figure out which is true, we really have to look back. Section 1. The Storm Within. The Origins of Elon Musk. To understand the incredibly high stakes he plays with today, we absolutely have to rewind to the very beginning in South Africa. Today, public perception is often of this real-life Tony Stark, a highly confident, untouchable billionaire visionary. But the reality of his origins? It honestly couldn't be further from that. He was a scrawny, highly introverted kid who was completely socially awkward. He grew up facing severe bullying, literally to the point where he was once beaten unrecognizably on the playground. And all of that was coupled with a deeply traumatic and poverty-stricken home life.
Musk himself is quoted in our source saying, my mind is a storm. I don't think most people would want to be me. This chaotic, relentless drive of his stems directly from that painful youth, which included a severely abusive father who, as our source notes, even had children with his own stepdaughter. It was a profoundly messed up environment, and it left a lasting, incredibly complicated impact on his psyche.
So the crucial point for us is how he actually managed to cope with all of that trauma. Well, he retreated heavily into computer games and books. He had this unique, almost obsessive ability to memorize everything he read. His mind was quite literally exploding with ideas. In fact, he actually feared that people would find out how his mind worked and think he was insane, maybe even try to lock him away. But instead of letting that happen, he channeled that intense isolation into mastering knowledge, constructing these little digital universes where he finally had some actual control. Recognizing this coping mechanism is huge because it really helps explain his relentless drive to control his external world today. And let's look at a really specific outcome of that early obsession: $500. That is the exact amount he made when he was just 12 years old. He coded his very own space-themed video game called Blaster, and he successfully sold it. It was his first real taste of turning a constructed, controllable universe into a tangible reward, and it planted a massive seed for what was to come.
Section 2. The dot-com boom. Building the empire.
Leaving that painful past behind, he packed up and migrated to North America to chase the explosive rise of the internet in Silicon Valley. His timeline here tracks a phenomenal, super rapid ascent. In 1995, as a completely broke 23-year-old writing software, he starts Zip2, helping newspapers get online. Fast forward just a few years to the late 90s, and he sells it for $400 million in cash. Boom. Then, in 1999, he founds the online banking startup X.com to transform traditional finance. By the early 2000s, that company merges and ultimately becomes a $1.5 billion bonanza known as PayPal. He literally disrupted two massive sectors back to back.
But, smooth sailing never lasts. Section 3. Surviving the 2008 Abyss. Tragedy and risk.
Before his businesses really started to struggle, there was a deeply humanizing and profound personal tragedy. He suffered the devastating loss of his infant son, Nevada Alexander, to a SIDS-related incident when the baby was just 10 weeks old. This unimaginable grief heavily influenced his worldview and his search for meaning moving forward. Our source material shares an incredibly specific, touching anecdote about how he processed this loss. He found a comforting ritual by attending the Burning Man festival 6 times. He would always find a quiet place on the temple wall, write his deceased son's name, Nevada Alexander Musk, and then simply watch as they set the temple on fire. It was a vital, cathartic release for him during an incredibly dark time. He needed a reason to just wake up in the morning,
right? And that need birthed SpaceX. The core philosophy here is actually fascinating. It's not just about building cool rockets. Musk views it as taking out life insurance for life itself. He's driven by this profound desire to prevent the tiny, fragile candle of human consciousness from being extinguished in the vast darkness of space. It's a really striking reminder of how profound personal loss can sometimes spark a drive to protect humanity on a massive scale.
But then we hit 2008, and he was hit by an absolute perfect storm. Just look at these compounding threats. SpaceX suffered 3 consecutive Falcon rocket failures. Tesla was hemorrhaging tens of millions of dollars every single month. Personally, he was going through a divorce. And globally, the world was plunging into the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Yet, driven by what seems like an extreme addiction to risk, he staked his final remaining millions on his failing companies rather than letting them die. He gambled literally everything. And miraculously, he survived.
Section 4, the Twitter takeover, addicted to drama. So we have to ask the question, why would someone who finally achieved immense, stable success, becoming the absolute richest person on Earth, suddenly pivot to buy a massive, chaotic social media platform? Well, the source highlights a fascinating psychological observation. Musk seems fundamentally addicted to risk and drama. When life gets too smooth, he has this absolute compulsion to stir things up. He simply cannot accept stable success. He employs an extreme urgency and a severe bias towards immediate action. People close to him describe him entering what they call demon mode, a state that causes absolute chaos all around him, but undeniably gets things done. And it was this relentless restlessness that culminated in his sudden 2022 offer to buy Twitter. And as we all know, he didn't just buy the company. He rapidly took a hatchet to the existing corporate structure. A massive 80% of the staff were laid off, retaining only about 20% of the original workforce. It was his personal playbook of extreme urgency playing out in real time, right there on a global stage. His approach to leadership in this newly acquired company was completely unapologetic, entirely rejecting traditional corporate norms. When advertisers started threatening to pull their money over his changes to the platform, his response was aggressive, public, and just pure defiance. He essentially told them, if somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f*** yourself. Section 5. The Political Chainsaw, the Woke Mind Virus, and Doge. Now, we are going to look strictly and impartially at his recent, highly polarizing political transformation, basing this entirely on his stated motives. His political alignment has shifted dramatically. Just a few years ago, he was a center-left voter who supported and donated to Obama and Biden. Today, he is an aggressive, outspoken crusader against what he calls the woke mind virus. This rapid 180-degree turn naturally prompts a major question. What was the root cause of this sudden shift? Well, our source points to a deeply personal catalyst. According to Musk, this shift stems from intense personal pain regarding his child. His eldest child, Xavier, transitioned to Jenna. Following this, she became fiercely anti-capitalist, completely rejected him, and legally changed her last name to cut all ties. Musk claims that he essentially lost his son, stating he was killed by the woke mind virus. It's an objectively heartbreaking family estrangement, and it's one that he explicitly cites as the primary fuel for his current political crusade.
And this personal crusade has now manifested into formal political action that will directly impact American bureaucracy, which is something every single citizen should probably be paying attention to. Let's look at the goals of the newly proposed Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. He has aligned himself with President Trump to conduct an aggressive government audit. The stated goals here are to act as a chainsaw for bureaucracy, cutting financial waste, improving speed and efficiency, and notably, defunding organizations that currently regulate his own companies. As you might fully expect, this has resulted in perfectly polarized public reactions. On one side, supporters see him as a hero, a much-needed genius doing exactly what's required to stop bureaucratic waste and save the country's finances. But on the exact opposite side, critics view him as an out-of-control billionaire literally raiding the government, destroying the country's institutions, and operating with a massive conflict of interest. Our source presents both of these views clearly, showing just how deeply divided the world is on his recent actions. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer and to this final provocative thought. We've traced his path from a traumatized, bullied kid to a risk-addicted billionaire building rockets, dismantling social media platforms, and taking a chainsaw to government bureaucracy.
So after weighing his deep traumas, his undeniable technological achievements, and the absolute chaos he leaves in his wake, we leave the question to you. Is Elon Musk a superhero or a supervillain? The source suggests you have to choose one. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep learning.